Imagine this: you wake up one day and realize that everything you've ever wanted, everything you've worked for, is meaningless. The job, the house, the relationships, the hobbies, they're all just temporary distractions from a deeper, more profound truth. Suffering is unavoidable. What if I told you that this isn't just my opinion, but a fundamental insight into the human condition, as explained by one of the most profound philosophers in history, Arthur Schopenhauer? And what if I told you that understanding this truth could change your life? Not by avoiding suffering, but by accepting it. Stay with me, because by the end of this journey, you'll see the world and yourself like never before. We live in a world obsessed with comfort and pleasure. Everywhere you look, there's someone promising you happiness, whether it's a product, a lifestyle, or a relationship. But Schopenhauer didn't sugarcoat reality. He saw through the illusions we create to shield ourselves from pain. All life is suffering, he declared. It's not something we can escape from, it's woven into the very fabric of existence. And here's the kicker: the more you chase happiness, the more you increase your suffering. Why? Because desire, the relentless yearning for something we don't have, is the root of all misery. As Schopenhauer put it, desire is the cause of all suffering. Think about it for a second. Every time you want something, a better job, a better partner, a better version of yourself, you're acknowledging a lack, a void. You're telling yourself that who you are, where you are, isn't enough. And even if you manage to get what you want, the satisfaction is fleeting. You achieve the goal, and almost immediately, a new desire takes its place. This endless cycle is what Schopenhauer called the will. The will is this blind, ceaseless force driving us to want, to strive, to crave. And it doesn't stop. It's insatiable. Now, here's where it gets even more interesting. Schopenhauer wasn't just talking about humans. He believed that this endless striving was the essence of all life. Look at nature. Animals fight to survive. Ants stretch toward the sun. Life itself is a constant struggle, a never-ending attempt to overcome obstacles. And the moment you stop striving, that's death. So in Schopenhauer's view, life isn't just full of suffering, it is suffering. But before you start thinking this is all doom and gloom, let's pause for a moment. There's something liberating about facing this truth head-on. Because once you stop running from suffering, once you stop trying to escape it, you can begin to see it for what it is. Schopenhauer wasn't saying we should give up on life. He was saying we should stop deluding ourselves. The wise man, he wrote, does not chase after pleasure or flee from pain. Instead, he accepts suffering as an inevitable part of existence. And this is where things get practical. Let's say you're going through a tough time right now. Maybe you've lost someone you love, or you're dealing with failure, or you're just feeling empty inside. The natural instinct is to resist, to fight against the pain, to distract yourself with something that feels good. But what happens when you do that? The pain doesn't go away, it just gets buried, and eventually it comes back even stronger. Schopenhauer would tell you to do the opposite. Instead of avoiding the pain, lean into it. Accept it. Observe it without judgment. This doesn't mean you have to enjoy suffering. It's not about masochism. It's about recognizing that suffering is a teacher. It strips away the superficial layers of life and forces you to confront what really matters. For example, think about the last time you experienced deep pain. Maybe it was heartbreak, or rejection, or failure. In that moment, everything else faded away, didn't it? The trivial concerns of daily life, the petty distractions, they all seemed meaningless compared to the raw intensity of what you were feeling. That's the power of suffering. It cuts through the noise and brings you face to face with the truth of your existence. And here's another insight from Schopenhauer that might surprise you. Suffering isn't just unavoidable, it's also universal. It doesn't matter who you are or what you have, everyone suffers. The billionaire suffers. The monk suffers. The child suffers. This universality can actually be a source of comfort because it reminds us that we're not alone. As Schopenhauer put it, the deeper the grief, the closer is the soul to God. In other words, suffering has the potential to connect us to something greater than ourselves. But let's take it a step further. If suffering is universal, then why do we spend so much time comparing ourselves to others? Why do we envy people who seem to have it all? Schopenhauer would say that envy is one of the most irrational emotions because it's based on the illusion that someone else's life is free from suffering. But if you could see behind the curtain, if you could truly understand what someone else is going through, you'd realize that their life is just as full of struggle as yours. Maybe in different ways, but the pain is still there. This brings us to a practical takeaway: stop comparing your life to others. It's a futile exercise. Instead, focus on understanding your own suffering. What is it teaching you? How can you use it to grow? Schopenhauer believed that suffering could lead to wisdom if we approached it with the right mindset. Suffering is the origin of consciousness, he wrote. It's through our pain that we gain insight into ourselves and the world. But there's another side to this coin. While suffering is unavoidable, Schopenhauer also believed that there are ways to transcend it, at least temporarily. One of these ways is through art. When you immerse yourself in music, literature, or visual art, you're able to step outside the relentless cycle of desire and suffering, even if only for a moment. In those moments, you're not striving or yearning, you're simply existing. And in that state of existence, there's a kind of peace. Another way to transcend suffering is through compassion. When you recognize that everyone around you is also struggling, you can develop a sense of empathy that goes beyond your own pain. Compassion allows you to connect with others on a deeper level, and in doing so, it lightens your own burden. Schopenhauer saw compassion as one of the highest virtues because it's rooted in the understanding that we're all in this together. Now, let's bring this back to you. What can you do right now to apply Schopenhauer's insights to your own life? Start by accepting that suffering is a part of the human experience. Stop running from it. Stop trying to numb it with distractions. Instead, face it. Sit with it. Learn from it. And when you're ready, use it as a bridge to connect with others. Because in the end, we're not just individuals isolated in our own pain, we're part of a collective journey. Let's dive deeper into this journey. Now that we've accepted suffering as an unavoidable part of life, we can begin to explore what this means for how we live, how we think, and how we relate to others. Schopenhauer's philosophy doesn't just stop at acknowledging suffering, it offers you a way to navigate it, a way to find meaning and even transcendence within the chaos of the human condition. But first, let's confront one of the most difficult truths of all. Even the things we think of as joyful or fulfilling are often rooted in the very same forces that drive our suffering. Schopenhauer argued that happiness, as we commonly understand it, is not a positive state but merely the temporary absence of suffering, the satisfaction of any wish. He wrote, merely makes room for another. It is like alms thrown to a beggar, which prolongs his life for a day, only to postpone his suffering tomorrow. Let that sink in for a moment. What we call happiness is not a lasting fulfillment, but a brief reprieve from the constant gnawing of the will. You get the promotion, and for a moment you feel elated. But soon, the excitement fades, and the same restless craving returns. Maybe now you want a raise, or a better title, or recognition from your peers. The cycle starts again. This is why Schopenhauer believed that the pursuit of happiness is inherently misguided. It's like chasing a mirage in the desert. The closer you think you are to it, the further away it gets. And even if you manage to reach it, you find that it wasn't what you thought it would be. The happiness you were longing for turns out to be hollow, and you're left feeling empty once again. So, what's the alternative? If happiness is fleeting and desire is endless, how are we supposed to live? The answer lies in understanding the nature of the will itself. The will, as Schopenhauer described it, is blind and irrational. It doesn't care about your well-being or your goals, it simply drives you forward, pushing you to want, to crave, to strive. But here's the thing, you are not your will. This is a radical idea, and it's one of the keys to Schopenhauer's philosophy. The will is a force within you, but it's not your true self. It's like a storm raging inside you, but you have the ability to step back and observe it. You don't have to let it control you. One of the ways to distance yourself from the will is through what Schopenhauer called denial of the will. This doesn't mean giving up on life or becoming a hermit. It means recognizing the futility of constant striving and choosing to focus on something deeper. For some, this might mean adopting a more ascetic lifestyle, letting go of material possessions, avoiding excessive pleasures, and seeking contentment in simplicity. For others, it might mean immersing themselves in creative or intellectual pursuits that allow them to transcend the demands of the will. Art, as we touched on earlier, plays a crucial role in this process. When you engage with art, whether it's listening to a piece of music, reading a novel, or gazing at a painting, you're able to step outside the endless cycle of desire and suffering. In those moments, you're not thinking about what you want or what you lack, you're simply experiencing the beauty of the world in a pure, unfiltered way. Schopenhauer believed that great art has the power to lift us out of our individual struggles and connect us to something universal, something timeless. But art isn't the only way to transcend the will. Another path is through compassion. When you focus on the suffering of others, you shift your attention away from your own desires and pains. You begin to see that your struggles are not unique, they're part of a shared human experience. This recognition can lead to a profound sense of connection and empathy. Schopenhauer described compassion as the great mystery of ethics because it allows us to break free from the isolating grip of the will and act out of genuine concern for others. Let's ground this in something practical. Imagine you're dealing with a difficult situation, maybe you've been rejected, or you've failed at something important to you. The natural reaction is to turn inward, to dwell on your pain and ask, why me? But what if, instead, you used that moment to reach out to someone else who's suffering? Maybe it's a friend who's going through a tough time or a stranger who needs help. By shifting your focus to their pain, you're not just helping them, you're also freeing yourself from the self-centeredness that amplifies your own suffering. This brings us to another important insight: suffering can be a source of meaning. This might sound counterintuitive, but think about it. When you look back on your life, it's often the moments of struggle and hardship that taught you the most, that shaped you into the person you are today. Schopenhauer believed that suffering has a kind of purifying effect. It strips away the superficial and forces us to confront the deeper truths of existence. It's through suffering that we grow, that we gain wisdom, that we come to understand what really matters. However, this doesn't mean we should seek out suffering or glorify it. The goal isn't to wallow in pain, but to use it as a tool for transformation. When you're in the midst of suffering, ask yourself, what is this teaching me? How can I use this experience to become stronger, wiser, more compassionate? This mindset doesn't make the pain go away, but it gives it a purpose, and sometimes that sense of purpose is enough to carry us through. Now, let's address one of the most common objections to Schopenhauer's philosophy. Isn't it too pessimistic? After all, if life is just suffering and desire is endless, what's the point of it all? This is where Schopenhauer's brilliance truly shines. He wasn't a nihilist. He didn't believe that life was meaningless. Instead, he saw life as a challenge, a test of our ability to rise above the will and find peace in the midst of chaos. Life is not a problem to be solved, he wrote, but a reality to be experienced. This perspective is incredibly empowering. It means that you don't have to wait for life to get better in order to find peace. You don't have to achieve your goals or fulfill your desires to feel whole. Peace is available to you right now, in this very moment, if you're willing to let go of the illusion that happiness lies somewhere in the future. It's not about giving up on life or abandoning your dreams. It's about approaching life with a sense of detachment and acceptance. You can still strive for things, but you do so with the understanding that no achievement will ever bring lasting fulfillment. And that's okay. So what does this look like in practice? It means cultivating a mindset of gratitude and presence. Instead of focusing on what you don't have, focus on what you do have. Instead of getting caught up in the endless pursuit of more, take a moment to appreciate the simple joys of life, a conversation with a friend, the beauty of nature, the feeling of being alive. These moments may be fleeting, but they're real. And in those moments, you're free from the will. You're free from suffering. Now that we've explored the inevitability of suffering and the ways in which we can begin to transcend it, let's dive even deeper into what this means for our daily lives and the choices we make. Schopenhauer's philosophy is not just an abstract set of ideas, it's a brutally honest roadmap for navigating existence. And while it may not lead to a conventional idea of happiness, it offers something far more profound: clarity, resilience, and a sense of purpose grounded in reality. To truly understand Schopenhauer's insights, we need to confront one of his most provocative ideas: the futility of existence. According to him, the universe is not governed by reason, purpose, or divine order. Instead, it is driven by the blind, insatiable force of the will. This means that life has no inherent meaning or ultimate goal. The world is my idea, Schopenhauer wrote, meaning that the reality we experience is shaped by our perceptions and desires. And because these desires are endless, we are trapped in a cycle of striving that never truly fulfills us. At first glance, this might seem depressing. If life has no inherent meaning, then what's the point of it all? But here's where Schopenhauer's philosophy takes a surprising turn. He wasn't telling us to despair, he was telling us to wake up. Most people go through life clinging to illusions: the illusion that wealth or success will bring happiness, the illusion that love will complete them, the illusion that there's some grand purpose waiting to be discovered. Schopenhauer challenges us to let go of these illusions and see life as it really is: unpredictable, chaotic, and often painful, but also full of moments of beauty and connection. So, if life has no ultimate meaning, how should we live? Schopenhauer's answer is both radical and deeply practical. First, we must stop looking for meaning outside of ourselves. The moment we stop chasing external validation, whether it's money, fame, or approval, is the moment we begin to reclaim our freedom. This doesn't mean we should abandon all goals or ambitions. Instead, it means recognizing that these things will never bring lasting fulfillment. We can pursue them, but we do so with the understanding that they are temporary and limited in their ability to satisfy us. Let's take an example. Imagine someone who spends their entire life striving for success: a bigger house, a higher salary, more recognition. They tell themselves, once I achieve this, I'll finally be happy. But when they reach their goal, they find that happiness is fleeting. Almost immediately, they begin to crave something else, something more. This is the cycle of the will at work. Schopenhauer would urge this person to step back and ask, why am I doing this? What am I really looking for? And is it possible that what I'm seeking can't be found in external achievements at all? This shift in perspective can be life-changing. When you stop identifying so strongly with your desires, you create space for something deeper to emerge. You begin to see that your worth is not defined by what you achieve or possess. You start to appreciate the present moment for what it is, rather than constantly wishing it were different. And in this state of acceptance, you may find a kind of peace that no amount of striving can ever bring. But Schopenhauer didn't just stop at acceptance. He also believed in the transformative power of certain practices that can help us rise above the will. We've already discussed art and compassion, but let's go deeper into how these can be integrated into our lives. Art, for Schopenhauer, is more than just entertainment, it's a way of stepping outside of ourselves. When we engage with great art, we temporarily escape the prison of the will and experience the world from a higher perspective. This is why music, in particular, was so important to Schopenhauer. He believed that music speaks directly to the essence of the will. It bypasses our intellect and connects us to the raw, universal emotions that underlie all of existence. Listening to music, then, is not just a form of distraction, it's a way of transcending the endless cycle of desire and suffering. Think about the last time you were moved by a piece of music or art. At that moment, you weren't thinking about your problems or your goals. You weren't caught up in the endless chatter of your mind. You were simply present, absorbed in the experience. Schopenhauer would say that in those moments you were free from the will. This is why he saw art as one of the greatest gifts of human existence. It allows us to rise above our individual struggles and glimpse something eternal. Compassion, too, offers a path to transcendence. When we act out of compassion, we step outside of our own desires and focus on the needs of others. This doesn't just alleviate their suffering, it also diminishes our own. Why? Because compassion is rooted in the recognition that we are all connected. When you see another person's pain, you're reminded that suffering is universal. And in that recognition, there's a kind of liberation. You realize that your own suffering is not unique or isolating, it's part of the shared human experience. But compassion isn't just about grand gestures or acts of charity. It can be as simple as listening to someone who's struggling, offering a kind word, or being present for a friend in need. These small acts of empathy can have a profound impact, not just on the people around you, but also on your own sense of purpose and connection. Schopenhauer also emphasized the importance of what we might call mindfulness today. He believed that much of our suffering comes from our tendency to dwell on the past or worry about the future. When we're constantly reliving old regrets or anxiously anticipating what's to come, we're missing the only moment that truly exists, the present. By cultivating a mindset of presence and awareness, we can begin to break free from the grip of the will. This doesn't mean ignoring your problems or pretending that everything is fine. It means facing reality as it is, without adding unnecessary layers of judgment or resistance. When you're present, you're not fighting against life. You're simply experiencing it. And in that state of presence, you may find a kind of peace that transcends both pleasure and pain. Finally, let's talk about the idea of transcendence itself. Schopenhauer believed that while we can never fully escape the will, we can learn to rise above it in moments of insight and clarity. These moments don't come through striving or effort, they come through letting go. Letting go of our need to control everything. Letting go of our attachment to outcomes. Letting go of the illusion that life is something we can conquer or master. This is the paradox at the heart of Schopenhauer's philosophy. The more you let go, the freer you become. When you stop clinging to the idea that life should be a certain way, you open yourself up to the possibility of experiencing it as it is. And in that state of acceptance, you may find a kind of meaning that goes beyond words, a meaning that doesn't depend on achieving anything or attaining some ultimate goal. This is the challenge Schopenhauer offers us: to live with eyes wide open, to face the reality of suffering without flinching, and to find peace not in the absence of pain but in the acceptance of it. It's not an easy path, but it's a path that leads to true freedom. So, the question is, are you willing to walk it?